Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to another Irish Stew video. These are hodgepodge videos where I talk about whatever happens to be on my mind from being terminally online, from looking at the world news and US news and YouTube and BookTube, and then focusing on me at the end. I started doing these videos a short while ago, because I was absolutely socked with a deadline assignment. And I finished that deadline assignment, but you all seem to enjoy the Irish Stew videos, even though large parts of them are not book related. And this is a book channel. And I want to honor that, because I like to I don't care about the algorithm at all, but I like to give you what you're enjoying. Every one of you who has commented on these Irish Stew videos has said you want them to be longer. That you want them not only to be every day, but to be longer. Every section to be longer. Break down the world news, break down the US news, break down YouTube that we might not watch, break down BookTube, make that as long as you want, make that last week in BookTube, and then tell us about your aches and pains or your latest tech obsession or whatnot. And I wanted to do that, but what am I supposed to do today for an Irish Stew video? What am I supposed to do? How many of the categories that we talk about, if we have 5 categories, how many of them? World news, only one thing the world is talking about. US news, there's only one thing the US is talking about. YouTube, there's only one thing that YouTube is talking about. And also me. There's only one thing I'm thinking about. So the category that's left is BookTube. And we can get to BookTube so that we can end on at least a happy note. But I figure if I'm going to do these Irish Stew videos, a point about them would be doing them in good times and bad, for dark subjects and otherwise. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong about that. You feel free to tell me. When it comes to this video, you are leading me as to what you want. And the subject, of course, that I want to talk about here is Charlie Kirk. And I want to start off by describing who he was, for any of you who might not know and might have missed the absolute tsunami of reactions in the last 24 hours. And I'm going somewhere with this. I'm building to something with this, but I want to describe Charlie Kirk first. And I want to start with an overarching observation that in any other century would not be up for debate, which is that Charlie Kirk was a wicked man. He was an evil man. Every single day of his working life, I am not talking about his home. I am not talking about his wife and his lovely children. I am not talking about his personal friends. I'm talking about what he did for a living. I'm talking about his public-facing persona. Every single day of his working life, he did one thing and one thing only. He preached hatred. Every single day. Hatred of Jews, hatred of black people, hatred of trans people, hatred of gay people whom he wanted all of them executed according to Old Testament law, according to 8th century law. Poor people, often the subject of his ridicule and his hatred. Every single day, in speaking engagements, big and small, online and in person, every day of his waking life, all he did was preach hatred. And that would be enough to describe him as an evil man, as a wicked man. But his wickedness is much worse than that, because he intentionally positioned himself not just to preach hatred, but to teach hatred to others, specifically to young men between the ages of 18 and 25, which is a demographic that I have always cared about a lot. He dedicated himself not just to preaching hatred, but to teaching those young men how to hate just like him. He made an entire event designed as a shrine to doing that, and told its constituents that they needed to up the outrageousness of the hatred every year for that event, Turning Point USA. I think it's important to describe Charlie Kirk that way before I mention why he is the only thing that the world or the United States or YouTube or social media is talking about. And again, I find it hard to believe that any of you don't know this. Yesterday, at an open-air event in Utah, where he was talking to a paid audience, an audience of thousands of people, hundreds of people who came there paid to listen to him talk and to debate with people, which one of his favorite things to do was to have public debates with people. They weren't good faith debates. I should point that out. They were not good faith debates. He intentionally screened and targeted people in his audience that he knew he could run circles around as a practiced public debater. But they at least had the outward veneer of an exchange of ideas. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's in fact enshrined in the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. And no one was coerced to be there. It was an adoring crowd of people watching him in person and also watching him on live streams in all sorts of venues and all sorts of media, including, almost certainly, his wife and the older of his two children. Almost certainly they were watching this event. It was a beautiful, bright day in the beautiful state of Utah. A whole bunch of people in the crowd, most of them happy to be there, even if they didn't agree with him. And during that event, he was shot dead. Those of you who have only heard this story and not seen it should do yourself a favor and not go looking for it, because you won't be able to unsee it. And the internet is not doing what it has done in earlier tragedies like this, where almost by concerted effort, all venues in the internet would quickly clamp down on you even being able to see that clip. As far as I can tell from looking this morning, that clip is still everywhere. And the shooter is still at large at the time of my making this video. It was a single shot. It struck him in his jugular. It was not random. It was not amateur. And it was not nearby. It wasn't someone in the crowd. It was someone on a rooftop 200 yards away, 2 football fields away. Which says a lot. It suggests a lot to me. It suggests that it was a professional marksman. It's very hard to do that. But we don't know. We don't know anything about it. All we know is that a young man, 31 years old, a father and a husband, beloved by his audience, was shot dead on camera in public. And I don't think there's any chance at all that he was murdered for any reason other than his political stances. I don't think there's any chance this was not a political assassination. And the reason why I started describing Charlie Kirk instead of describing his death is because his death, like so many things in life, presents a moral challenge. Not just that video. The video on its own presents a moral challenge, but the event itself, without any video, presents a moral challenge. Because Charlie Kirk was brutally murdered. And also, Charlie Kirk was a wicked man who dedicated his life to making more wicked men. He hated Jews. He hated black people. He hated anyone who wasn't white. He hated gay people. He wanted women to be slaves to their husbands. I have no idea if any of that was reflected on the home front. Many times the ideologues who have these opinions in public don't bring them across the doorstep into the house. Many times they don't. In my opinion, that makes it worse, because that means they're lying for money. They're saying all of this evil stuff for money. On the one hand, he was that. He was an evil man who taught other men how to be evil. Every day of his life, he punched down. Every day of his life, he divided, mocked, and belittled instead of including, embracing, or trying to build understanding. Don't be fooled by the fact that most of the time that he did public events, they looked like debates. He was never going to change his own mind about anything. And he didn't care if he changed the other person's mind. He mainly cared if he ridiculed them effectively. That was him. And on the other side of that challenge, that moral challenge, is how he met his end. That makes it extremely personal. That's, I think, why it's resonating so much all over the world, because it's extremely personal. It doesn't have anything to do, really, ultimately, with what you thought about those evil things he said. It ultimately comes down to a personal moral challenge. If you can listen to what the things he said when he was alive, every time he made a public appearance, if you can listen to those things and say, all of that is right, then you are a wicked person. And if you can watch the video, God forbid, or even hear a description, learn that he was shot to death, and smile, or dance, or chant on TikTok, you are a wicked person. And if you, to the extent to which you approach either of those extremes, is the moral challenge here. If you agreed with the things that he said when he was alive, then the moral challenge is the emotions that you are feeling now towards his perceived enemies. We don't know anything about the shooter, so we don't know if there was ideology involved. And if you listened to the accounts of his death, or God forbid, watched it, and your first reaction was happiness, then you have failed that moral challenge. And it's been my personal belief for a long time that if you approach a moral challenge and fail to meet it, you shouldn't talk much about that, except to your closest friends. You shouldn't talk in public about it, and you certainly shouldn't brag about it. Charlie Kirk, from when he was about 17 years old, met a series of moral challenges and failed to meet every single one of them. That's how he became what he was. He failed at every opportunity. And he bragged about it. In fact, he made a career out of it. And I've seen a lot of people in the last 24 hours doing likewise, failing to meet the moral challenge and bragging about it in public. Either by saying, as the entire MAGA ecosystem is now saying, death to our opponents, death to anyone who doesn't love Trump. Or by watching that hideous video and laughing. That's what I've been watching in the last 24 hours. I've been watching people who don't share my belief that that kind of a failure should be private. It should be the work of reflection to find out what you're made of. And that's why I am not going to go on at any greater length about this. And the reason why is because I fail that moral challenge. Which means it's a subject matter fit for talking about with close friends, but not for talking about in public. I, at least partially, fail that moral challenge. I didn't dance or laugh or cheer when I saw that video. I didn't fail completely. Like so many of the people I have seen online so far. I didn't fail completely. But that's no consolation. I still did fail. I am failing. So I'm not going to discuss the subject. The ramifications, I think, will become obvious fairly immediately. I think the ramifications have already been foreshadowed by the nation's foremost Nazi, Stephen Miller, who often does tip the hand of the administration that he is shaping and guiding. He is the main force of MAGA, the main architect of it. And he already tipped his hand during a televised interview. He yells when he's in interviews. He screams. It's Hitlerian podium pounding. And at one point in one of those interviews, I guess you could call it, he said that anyone that isn't MAGA should be politically outlawed. I don't think he has any random ideas when he's in front of a camera, so I'm pretty sure that has been discussed and planned. And the foremost ramification that I worry about is that this will enormously accelerate that. So that, quite apart from, the election, the actual tabulation methods being rigged, and quite apart from platoons of beefy, face-masked, armed, and unidentified men posted at every polling place in the country, that maybe in many polling places there won't be any Democrats listed on the ballot because they will have been declared a terrorist organization or a suspect organization or something like that. That's the ramification that I'm looking at the most, and I think that was telegraphed by Stephen Miller. But ramifications are different from the event itself. The event itself is a visceral reaction, and your reaction to this thing is a moral challenge, and that's a serious thing. That's a very serious thing. Even in our own morally debased age, it doesn't get any more serious than that. That's a bellwether of you, and that's why I'm not going to bring the subject up again. But naturally, that dominates an Irish Stew video because it's the only subject. No matter what you're commenting on, you can comment on, there are MAGA commentators talking about how people are celebrating online. There are leftists, so-called leftist commentators, commenting on all the talk of war and executions in MAGA. Those extremes will be with us, I think, for the rest of the year. This will be a story that will be slow to die. It will be given a huge boost if the shooter is taken alive. But we shall see. But anyway, naturally that was going to dominate a video series like this. I'm hoping that it won't stay that way. I'm hoping that I will feel more disposed to do a more enjoyable version of this tomorrow. But in the meantime, we can at least talk about BookTube. Let's at least end with BookTube. Everybody on BookTube knows about this subject, and yet people have been making videos anyway on bookish subjects, which I've been trying to do too today. I will continue to try to do that. And we should, because again, you can't change any of this. The only difference between this, I always tell you that. I always say there's no sense you getting all wound up about news stories that you can't change, and that's true. The only difference here is that this has a directly personal element. This is a personal moral challenge for you, whereas reading about tariffs is not. So booktubers have been coming to the rescue, is what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to do that myself today, but whether I succeed or not, I will try to do better tomorrow. And we can. I have just a couple of booktube things that I can link you to maybe take your mind off all of this. Like, for instance, Gavin at Genre Books has a wonderful series that is going on his channel where he discusses lost penguins, Penguin Classic editions of works that have been dropped from the current lineup. And he does the letter F in his most recent video, a work of Ferdowsi that is not the Shahnameh was dropped. Henry Fielding's Jonathan Wild, and I think a couple of other things also dropped by him, by Penguin. The Penguin's great collection of the letters of Flaubert dropped. That's just part of just one letter. So if you're looking for that kind of distraction, that's a very interesting series. You could watch the latest one and then watch all the others to find out what has and hasn't been in Penguin Classic and what they've dropped over the years. I find it fascinating. And then there's T from An Erudite Adventure, who did a video on a common theme, which is if you love Tolkien, as he does, what else might you love? What other books might you want to read that maybe you've not thought of? Maybe some of his recommendations will be of use to you, especially if you're new to Tolkien. Maybe you've just left The Lord of the Rings, you've just left Middle-earth, and you have that horrible book hangover, I believe it's called, where you don't know what to read next. You want something similar. So I will leave links to both those videos just to try to salvage the friendly nature of this series of videos. And I will also think about whether or not I want to upload this, because I don't want to make your day any grimmer than it already is, especially if you've been following this story. If you've been following this story, your day is pretty grim already. Not just because a young man with a family was shot to death in front of thousands of people, but also for what might be coming, for what other evil people might do with this event. So obviously you can tell it's on my mind. So, and I figured I shouldn't avoid that in this video, although I can avoid it in all my others today. So I don't know. If you really hate this, I'll just let me know and I'll take the video down. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up before it goes any longer. But I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.